playoff, baby. Big 12 open for business.
You know, Mitch.
They love their Cougars.
Welcome on in, Cougar Tracks podcast, powered by KSLSports.com. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. Happy as always to have you on board of the podcast wherever and however you may be listening to the show. BYU basketball gets a huge win, 93-89 over the Baylor Bears in overtime. Cougs secure their third consecutive victory in Big 12 play. It was a big one inside the Marriott Center, and the good times are rolling for this BYU basketball team, and I'll unpack all my thoughts from Tuesday night's victory here on this edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast. You can follow me on X, all the socials, and then follow KSL Sports and download the KSL Sports app as well. So again, 93-89, BYU gets it done in overtime. And I got to say, you know, this was a very entertaining basketball game. And it was one where the stars lived up to the hype. Yegor Demon, Richie Saunders, VJ Edgecombe. And then underrated freshmen who've got NBA potential and NBA futures, I think, ahead of them in Wright and Catchings. They came up huge. And, you know, for BYU, they just outlasted Baylor a little bit longer to get that 4-point victory. Baylor played one of their better games, I think, on the road against a, quality opponent in BYU, and I do view BYU as a quality opponent, especially in the Marriott Center. I mean, BYU is one of the toughest outs in college basketball in the Marriott Center. And when you're shooting 55% from the field, 38% from three, 81% from the free throw line, you're going to win a lot of ball games. And you're going to have a chance to take down anyone that this conference in the Big 12 has to offer. So it's always going to be a tough venue. And I thought Baylor showed pretty well considering their limitations on their roster with, Langston Love being out, Jeremy Roach being out. Despite that, they still played pretty well. But BYU, you got to give credit to them. They had a huge win getting this one. It's their first quad one victory of the season. And the star of the night was Kanon Catchings, 23 points in a perfect evening, 8 of 8 from the field, 4 of 4 from three. Kanon Catchings was brilliant, and he was a perfect 3 of 3 from the free throw line in 25 minutes of action. He had 1 rebound, 1 block shot. Catchings did a fantastic job on the offensive end. And that's the jolt that BYU desperately needed from him. They needed that from Catchings because, he was looking like a player, since that Oklahoma State game when he was coming off the bench, where it's like, is he all in still? And the thing is that it's a resounding yes, because he still stayed engaged. He still stayed part of the process with this team and stayed invested and stayed committed, even though he was coming off a different role, coming off the bench instead of being in the starting 5. He's embraced that, and he was ready for his moment when called upon. And I think that is a huge thing for Kevin Young's program going forward. I mean, I think it's been noteworthy all along that Kevin Young was willing to make changes to his starting lineup. But now this is another layer where a guy that does, go from starting 5 to the bench, and he's still, working hard, trying to get better every single day, stacking the days, as Kevin Young talks about. And he stacked him to the point where he has a perfect night in a evening where there were 30 NBA scouts on hand to watch these guys compete. Pretty impressive stuff from Kanon Catchings. I thought Yegor Demon, with all the NBA scouts watching, I thought he was impressive. 15 points, 5 of 10 from the field, 1 of 5 from three. Still want to, improve that clip a little bit. 6 assists, 2 rebounds. 4 turnovers, you want to get that number down a bit. But I thought Yegor was solid. Richie Saunders, not as efficient as we've grown accustomed to with Richie. 17 points, 6 of 15 from the field, 0 of 4 from three. But, man, he could slice up Baylor's defense, and he was getting to the rim for BYU. He had 6 boards as well. VJ Edgecombe for Baylor, he was outstanding. I would say he was probably the best player from an opponent that I've seen roll into the Marriott Center since Chet Holmgren with Gonzaga. VJ Edgecombe was legit. 28 points for him, 9 of 15 from the field, 6 of 8 from 3, 4 of 5 from the free throw line. BYU was, always in the lead in this game. Baylor's largest lead was 3 points at the 17:58 mark of the first half. Outside of that, it was all BYU. BYU was up 13 with 4:52 left in the first half. Then Baylor, kind of cut it down, and then BYU went on another run of their own in the first half. But, BYU always kind of kept in front of Baylor. They always had answers. And I think that's what's noteworthy about this game for BYU is that, they were so focused on trying to find ways to win close games. Well, they did it. They did that finally. And I think that's going to be something that they can really build off of going forward. I don't look at Baylor as a team that's, a Sweet 16 type of team. They got the talent that if Edgecombe plays the way that he did against BYU, they could get hot for a weekend and make the second weekend. But, Baylor in recent history since their national championship, they're just a round of 32 out. That they haven't reached the Sweet 16 since they won the national championship in 2021. And I would probably assume that they're going to have more of the same in the postseason unless, they really get on a hot streak going forward here. They're just really thin on their depth. They only had, 7 players, and then Omir got, fouled out late in overtime. They were down to 6 guys. So if this thing had gone to double overtime, they would have been really thin with that crew, and even VJ Edgecombe had 4 fouls. So Baylor has some impressive top-end athletes, but they're not as deep as they were in those years when they were a national title contender for a stretch there in this Baylor program. But it was a heck of a ball game, and it was one that a lot of Cougar fans, I think, are going to remember this one. I thought it was really cool, too, when Richie Saunders had an and one to put BYU up 73-67 or extend the lead, and Kevin Young was fired up. He's high-fiving fans, the courtside seats next to the BYU bench. You kind of saw that emotion, and Kevin Young even said that a little bit of the ex-player came out in that moment because, he's businesslike. Kevin Young is all business, and I like that about him because it's the right tone, the tenor that BYU basketball needs in an era of college basketball where it is all about business, and that's Kevin Young to a T. But I liked how he kind of showed a little bit more emotion and had that moment where he just got incredibly hyped and understood the moment because this was a big game for this team to take down Baylor. Baylor's got a brand in college basketball. Look, they're not like what they once were, 4 or 5 years ago. I understand that. But still, that program gets high-level talent, and the back and forth between these two teams, it was a heck of a ball game. The Big 12 is delivering some great games since, the past few days. Yesterday, it was Arizona, Iowa State. Saturday, it was Kansas, Houston, and now this one, BYU and Baylor, epic game. I got to give praise, too, to Robert Wright, Baylor freshman guard, who, similar to Catchings, probably an under-the-radar prospect for the NBA draft. I don't think he's a consensus first-round pick, but he could be someone that is drafted either this year or in 2026. He steps up and buries 2 free throws with 4 seconds left when the Marriott Center was deafening. I thought for sure he was going to miss at least one of those. But, man, towards the end of that game, he just took over the ball game for Baylor, and BYU didn't have many answers on that front. But, BYU drew up a play that ends up in the hands of Dallin Hall, and he knocks down a potential game winner, but it was after the final horn. And that would have been an incredible moment for Dallin Hall to have that game winner because that's just who he is. He rises up in those clutch spots, and I think that was a nice sign, though, to see him kind of get that one to fall because it did carry over into the overtime period. But I like the play calls. I just think that BYU was operating a little bit too slow in that final play of the regulation. And then in overtime, I thought it was significant when instantly on the jump ball, Trevenell gets a quick bucket off that jump ball. And before you can blink, it's 80-78. BYU's got an edge. Because at the end of regulation, it felt like Baylor had the momentum. And that BYU was not necessarily not going to be able to pull it off, but it just felt like Baylor forcing that thing to get to OT in a night where you're always digging yourself out of a hole. That felt like a little bit of a victory for Baylor. So BYU's back was against the wall a little bit. I think that just kind of settled everyone in when Trevenell hit that quick bucket. And that was impressive to see. And then Dallin Hall, as I noted, he hit a 3-2 that carried over. And I thought that was a big moment for Dallin because, he wasn't looking for his shot in recent games. He wasn't knocking anything down. And to get one to fall, I thought that was great for Dallin. Now, he did have some turnovers in overtime. So you kind of got the full Dallin Hall experience at times in that overtime period. But that offensive performance, he reminds you that when he's looking for his shot, he can knock it down in a big spot. VJ Edgecombe, as I noted, he was knocking down open shot after open shot. He was big. Jaden Nunn was attacking the rim. It was just, I loved how it was not this, sloppy. There wasn't many scoring droughts. This was high-level college basketball, and, it was just a really entertaining product. And I think that's something that you can take away from this one. That was a really fun basketball game, and I thought in the overtime there were some moments where some of the officiating, I thought there were some questionable calls. Even one that bailed out BYU. I thought Omier probably, it was a close call on Yegor Demin when he was shooting the three. That obviously caused Omier to foul out. But by all accounts, I thought it was a pretty solid game. The whistles were frequent, but that didn't take away, I think, from the quality of play from the teams. And I like, too, that BYU, when they were up 3, they made the decision to foul Edgecombe and not let him shoot the 3. Kevin Young noted that was a play they practice often. They're not going to always turn to fouling when up 3. But in that situation, with Edgecombe having the ball and how hot he was from 3, they didn't want to give him a chance to get another shot off, so they fouled him. And that worked out great because with 11.5 remaining, Edgecombe goes to the foul line. BYU's up 91-88. He only makes one of 2 free throws. 10.6 remaining. And then BYU, with 10.6 seconds remaining, a brilliant inbounds play that killed time 1. They took care of the possession, and it led to Dawson Baker getting free. And I thought he was going to have an open lane just to get to the rim, and then he got fouled with 6.3 seconds remaining. And then Dawson Baker goes to the foul line, and dude is just clutch. He loves the moments when called upon, and Baker goes up, knocks down both free throws, and BYU goes up 93-89, and that was the ball game. And just a big win for BYU to give them that quad 1 victory. And I still think they're probably going to be a first 4 out, maybe next 4 out team. They're still going to be on that bubble, but that gets them back into the conversation to be in the bubble mix after getting this victory. So huge win for the Cougars. Got full breakdown and recap on KSLSports.com. It was kind of an eventful night once again from the entertainment side of things too. There was a half-court shot that was knocked down for tuition giveaway. And then, of course, Kalani Sitake, he was sitting courtside, but he wasn't the biggest star sitting courtside. That went to Conor McGregor, a former MMA star. And I don't claim to follow UFC as much as I once did. I used to watch a lot more UFC back in the day. Felt like I was kind of in the heyday when it was UFC 100, and now it's probably like UFC 250 or whatever now. But just seeing Conor McGregor, and I know he's got a sponsorship with Bucked Up, and he was there with some of the executives of Bucked Up, and it was just, again, surreal. Like how crazy this, athletic year has been with BYU sports when you're talking about low expectation football team turns into an 11-win team, and they climb to as high as number 6 in the rankings. And, they signed, BYU basketball signs the number 1 recruit in the country, and they land Kevin Young from the NBA. And now you've got, Woj was at a football game moments after he retired from being the ultimate newsbreaker with ESPN and the NBA. And he's at a BYU Kansas State football game of all places. And then now you get Conor McGregor. It's a wild scene. BYU sporting events, man, they are highly, highly entertaining. And that just adds another chapter to the entertainment value of BYU sporting events. So it was a fun night at the Marriott Center. Next up for the Cougars is Saturday, where they take on the UCF Knights, 2 p.m. tip in Orlando. That's going to be a tough venue. I was there last year in Orlando, and that was an underrated, hostile environment. And UCF took Kansas to the wire in Allen Fieldhouse. So UCF's a bubble team just like BYU. Going to be a big game that's bubblicious coming up this Saturday for the Cougars. But now they're on a 3-game winning streak, the first time they've done that as members in the Big 12 Conference in league play. So bunch of coverage on KSLSports.com. Go check that out. Talk to you next time here on the Cougar Tracks podcast, and it's powered by KSLSports.com.